I was going to say it was Morgan Freeman-esque. I was also going to say, that you look like him a little bit. What's up, everybody? Back here, the One's Ready team room. We got our friend, fighter pilot, Top Gun aficionado, just general good-looking dude with a great sounding a piece of audio.
Good shirt,
Ed.
good t-shirt too. I got a good t-shirt.
Yeah, I wore my branded stuff as well, but that's because I monetarily profit when people buy the shirt. But you just did it because you like us, and we appreciate that. How you doing today, Ed?
I'm doing great. I did. I had the shirt ready, by the way. Last time we did had a discussion. It was probably a month and a half ago. You guys very graciously sent me this wonderful shirt. I had it ready for our interview right here. So
I love it.
So if you haven't gotten your One's Ready swag, I have to say, like, I get quite a few t-shirts. Not many of them make it past the recycling bin over there.
That's a good one.
This is a nice piece of gear, dude.
It feels nice, right?
Stretchy. I could like kind of work out in this thing. So let's do it.
And that's the point is, when we started developing the shirts, that was a big thing. We want people to train in our stuff. We always tell people, like, send us a picture. We want you to beat it up. We want you to wear it out. And we had to look for the best tri-blend shirt that we could find. And we found it. It makes you look good. You tailor that shirt at the gym. I know gosh darn well, it's not just the tailoring in the shirt. So let's jump right into it, man. How are you feeling? How are you feeling recently? Was there anything that happened, let's say the last 3 weeks that made you feel like lighter, maybe better, maybe more hopeful? Was there anything that really is setting you off the last 3 weeks? Anything at all that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, we're recording this 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks after the election, November 5th.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
But by the way, I not to sort of pat myself on the back or anything, but I do all like news interviews all the time.
Sure.
People want my opinion on stuff, and about the mid-September, people are actually asking you for your, like, what do you think is going to happen? And most people answer this question with a series of ifs. Like, if you ever listen to the commentators, they'll say, well, if the conservative vote comes out, then Donald Trump will win. Or if women vote in the way we think.
Right. Well, listen, if Pennsylvania breaks the way that we think it's going to outside of Bucks County, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, like, I follow Alan Lichtman. Alan Lichtman's like, if the 13 keys hold true. And I tried as much as I could not to throw, because it's kind of a way to weasel out of your prediction,
Sure.
And I will say in mid-September, I said my best guess is going to be a landslide. I said, watch Florida. Right now, most people were predicting Florida at +3, +5. I said Florida will probably go +10. I said that publicly. Mm-hmm. By the way, Florida went +11.
Get it?
And then I said move north and look at Virginia, because I actually thought he had a chance of flipping Virginia.
Right.
He turned North Carolina, which is obviously really huge. Virginia was really close, like, except for that northeastern part of Virginia.
Oh yeah.
And it was just amazing watching. Like, I flipped back and forth between CNN, MSNBC. It was amazing to watch sort of the trend, the despair, setting in as the night went on. And then the popular vote obviously went in the way that it was. And then we're sitting there watching the Senate. What's interesting, though, is what's happened since then. And so this election, the term that people were using, I think very accurately, was like too big to rig moving into this election.
Sure.
And what's very interesting is what's been happening in Pennsylvania since then.
Since the election, right? People are not tracking this. If you guys aren't paying attention to what's happening in Pennsylvania, you really should. Oddly enough, the 6 states that still don't have 100% reporting your ballots counted, these are all swing states, and they're all non-voter ID states that are obviously in question every single year. It's weird that, we can no longer count paper ballots. Florida has a population much higher than everybody else, and they're somehow able to count their paper ballots on that day. And by dinner time, they're able to give you their whatever. But there's a, Supreme Court, it was just breaking today that Josh Shapiro finally had to admit that there's malfeasance and malpractice going on, and that the Supreme Court ruled that they're not allowed to count these illegal ballots. But it's still very much in question in Pennsylvania. Why is that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So first of all, the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania ruled 2 months ago, before the election, that not unsigned ballots or late entered ballots could not be counted, which is correct. Essentially, it's according to the way election law works is the state legislator makes the guidelines for the law, and of course the executive is supposed to enforce it, which is the governor, Josh Shapiro. The courts are supposed to tell the state what is legal and what's not legal. Mm-hmm. And of course, that was illegal according to the state election laws.
Of course.
And the Supreme Court said, yeah, that's legal. After that, a series of Democratic council women basically decided that they were going to go ahead and count votes, and publicly said, by the way, they said, people violate laws all the time in this country.
She literally said, and I quote, "I'm going to violate the law because that means I want the courts to take a look at it." That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works, Adam. It was insane that they would just flout the law in the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania like that.
And then the Supreme Court obviously came back and said, you can't do that. Now, the great thing, by the way, is that the governor stepped in the governor who's no friend to Donald Trump, by the way,
At
a
all.
Democratic governor.
Right.
There's an interesting side plot to this, which is Josh Shapiro. If you remember, he was one of the 2 or 3 people that Kamala Harris was looking at potentially for vice president. It wasn't stated at the time. My guess at the time was Shapiro basically said no, saw the writing on the wall,
Mhm.
and realized, like, for example, Tim Walz's brand is pretty much done.
Oh,
You,
he's
you can't
completely finished.
you can't let him march onto the stage like you do for 3 months and then can expect to continue, especially with
Yeah.
the devastating loss.
Right.
And hers is too, by the way. People talking about her running for governor in California. That's almost definitely not going to happen. But
What a symptom of the overall sickness that she's actually leading. They took a poll and they were like, "Hey, who would you support for
Yeah.
governor of California?" And she was leading by a wide margin. Like
it's just pure name recognition at that point.
absolutely sure.
I mean, there's and interestingly, another side story is the way the Democrats operate and the way the Republicans operate, very different in terms of like how
Completely.
they decide. The Democrats basically say this is our decision and everyone goes with it. And the
Doesn't matter who, we vote blue, baby. It doesn't matter. They fall
Yeah.
in line like, no, I've bemoaned conservatives and Republicans, and you can even see it bubbling up in some of these nominations. And you have the undercurrent of, these Republicans aren't going to support the Republican nominee, even though there's a mandate of the popular vote and all these other things. And you look and they really do. They organize, for whatever reason, like the blue blob does what the blue blob does better
For sure.
than conservatives. Far and away, they get in line right away. Doesn't vote blue, doesn't matter who. This is our nominee. You saw it in the primary process. Kamala Harris didn't get a single vote. Joe Biden was the presumptive nominee. He got 14 million votes or whatever it was, and then poof, nope, it's just Kamala Harris. And there was nary a whimper from the blue side. They were like, no, totally, this is our who cares about democracy? We're just going to go straight forward. They do it way better than the other side of the aisle.
In one way, I mean, like for example, right now, obviously, like the Republicans need to get around the cabinet picks and that sort of thing.
Right.
There is, however, we have this democracy, and it actually is helpful to have differing factions inside the party, kind of like struggling through certain issues. What you end up with, by the way, if you completely go bureaucratic like the Democrats go, what you end up with is Kamala Harris as a candidate.
Yeah,
like
you have a technocratic oligarchy is what you have. Like
you end up with this person who has no very, very, very flawed communication skills.
No,
a woman who clearly has no idea who she is. Like, you want to talk about identity issues? Like, I can tell just by the work that I've done with thousands of people. Like, you can look in someone's eyes and tell, do they know who they really are?
Right.
And she has no idea who she is. I think American people figured that out. So yeah, there is a time, I think, for a party to get in line and get together, like 2018, the midterms after 2016 was like a perfect example of that. And there's also a time to like kind of like struggle and debate and try to figure out who's who in the zoo. And that a great time for that would be 2023 when they're trying to figure out or 2027 when they're trying to figure out like, okay, who's going to be the next standard bearer,
Yeah.
So
do you think the Democrats are going to figure it out? We see a lot of self-reflection, and we see a lot of people that are kind of like turning, there's senators and congressmen and other people that are saying things now that they, no kidding, come out and say, hey, I was afraid of saying this. However, I came out and I said it now. There's some stuff about some trans rights coming out. There's some stuff about nutrition coming out. Do you think they're going to figure it out? Do you think they're going to do self-reflection enough to go, hey, the silent majority that we completely discounted, and kudos to you for saying those things out loud. I also said those things out loud.
Yeah.
I was having a text message with one of my friends who was far more black-pilled and far more skeptical than me the morning of. And he's like, bro, I'm so nervous. I'm like, listen, there's two things that are going to happen here that nobody is predicting correctly. And it's young women in this country, just like young men are turning conservative in droves. Young women are going to come out and they're going to vote for Trump. This soy boy, they try to tell us Tim Walz and Emhoff were like masculine men. Like, this is the new masculinity. Women don't want that. Women look at the Laken Riley incident, which congratulations, that guy is hopefully going to jail forever, all 10 counts, murder. I hope you rot. But they look at that and they go, no, listen, like this wafy, small man bun wearing barista isn't going to be able to protect me if I'm walking down the streets in Colorado and Tren de Aragua, the Argentinian gang that's taken over half of that state. If they get approached by some thugs, they don't want this person that you've told them. I was like, they don't feel safe. I think they're going to come out and vote. And that was one of the, kudos to you for calling it and saying like, it's going to be a landslide. I was saying the same thing, saying it publicly. I'm like, I think that the silent majority, there's always the broken windows. Is it bad enough theory? Dan Bongino talks about, is it bad enough? I think it got bad enough for 76 million Americans to go, no more.
Yeah. So the question as to whether they'll change. I would have never thought I would say this, honestly. Like what I've come to the conclusion of in the last 6 weeks or whatever. I never thought I would ever say this because I've never been a big fan of the two-party system. I actually am not a member of either one of the parties. I just feel like the tribal sort of party system is more destructive than it is helpful. That said, one of the blessings of the two-party system is the blob morphs towards the center,
Right.
And so if one party strays to an extreme, which clearly the Democratic Party did in the last 4 years, like
Very clearly.
immigration, trans rights, women in bathrooms, like women, dudes swimming in swimming pools against women. Like there's a lot of things that even the most like progressive, parent in Arizona is like, I don't know if I want that boy in that pool,
Right.
It's like the strangest things. And so what happens with the two-party system is the blob sort of morphs back to center. And so what you'll probably see over the next 2 years are more mainstream Democrats. And I have to say, like the Democratic Party used to be the party of like the working man,
Right. Yeah, unions and working class. Yeah, right.
Like if you saw a work truck 40 years ago, if you saw a work truck go by, you'd go, that dude's probably a Democratic voter.
Right.
You see a work truck come by now, he's got an American flag and a MAGA hat.
Trump flag and a MAGA hat, baby. And if it's a garbage truck, Trump might be driving it, baby. Choo choo, we coming, baby.
That shift. I mean, the union leadership largely was Democratic this year, but the rank and file union, unbelievable how that shifted. The Democratic Party was the anti-war party. The Republicans were sort of war hawks, and some of them still are. That shifted, like the way the political things shifted. So you have this like two-party blob, and it's fascinating to see how the things shift, but really you maintain a little bit of centrism, which can't hurt, especially when it slows down sort of the government trying to screw up your life. So.
Absolutely. Do you think that there's a return to, what we would like to, people are yearning for a return of normalcy. I think the Overton window has shifted so much that, part of that is nostalgia. Part of that is wishful thinking. Do you think there's more of a return to normalcy where people are able to have discourse in the bipartisan nature? Do we have to just say, and I know my answer for this, and I'm leading you into it just so I could say something hyperbolic, But do you think there's a return to normalcy here? Or do you think that it's time for the Republicans just to be like, hey, we've tried to bring you back to the table every single time. We are going to use some of your tactics now. And now that we wield these levers of power, we are going to use them appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits, by the way, this is the glory of the system that the founding fathers set up with the multiple parts of government and certainly even the multiple parts inside the legislature. You have the Supreme Court, the executive, and the legislature, which is broken down, as you know, into the House and the Senate. And right now, Republicans essentially control all of those.
Right.
And they have about a 2-year window to straight up get things done.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to get pushed forward. The women's sports one definitely needs to get taken care of. Taxation, there needs to be a massive change in the way that we do taxes. Ukraine needs to end. The situation in the Middle East needs to come to an end. All those things can be done in a 2-year period of time. That said, real change happens in about 40-year windows. So, and so I said this literally 2 days later. I was on the news, conservative news, and they were asking me, and I said, this is basically 1984. In 1984, Ronald Reagan won a re-election against Walter Mondale, and it was a unbelievable landslide. I think he won 49 out of 50 states. And most of the Republicans, good people in the world, conservatives sort of sat back and said, oh, we got it made in the shade. And in that moment, the Democratic Party was grooming Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, their future. And so there was a huge complacency that set in at the moment of victory. And I feel like now that's not the case. I feel like right now, most conservatives know, hey, like this is the time to get some gains.
Right.
And they've got about a 2-year window. They actually really only have about a 1.5-year window because about a 1.5 years from now, everyone's going to go back to their districts and run. All the House of Representatives folks are going to run again. So they've got a short period of time to get it done.
Right. I believe that you are correct. And what does Walter Mondale and Kamala Harris have in common?
They both lost.
They both lost. They both lost at a landslide, but they both skipped the Alfred E. Smith Memorial Dinner. Everybody, when she it was a fun parallel back to that other dinner. They both skipped that dinner and then they both lost. And it was funny because people came out of that and they were like, hey, the last time that a candidate was kind of on the precipice right here and they skipped the Alfred Smith dinner, you know what happened? And they brought up the Mondale loss to Ronald Reagan.
Remind me when I run for president to go to that dinner.
I'd be happy to be your strategist. I don't want to be forward facing, but I'll be in the background. I'll be your A dog.
That's a Catholic charity, right? Isn't that what that is?
It is, yeah. It is, yeah. But it's one of those things where you get together and it's kind of like a roast. You get up there, both presidential candidates get up and they make jokes, and it's a big, Catholic charity dinner. It was funny, and they got the snub. She famously put forth the video of Mary Catherine Gallagher, the character from Saturday Night Live, Molly Shannon's character from Saturday Night Live.
Which everything, by the way, it just goes to show. And I said this shoot like 6 months ago in June when she took over. Their commitment to DEI was so indelible that they actually had to completely surround themselves with hires that may have not been the most qualified person to run their social media, may have not been the most qualified person to run their video, may have not been the most qualified person to run their marketing, but they like golf clapped themselves because they hired someone who was sort of like a
the right hire,
trans, former inmate, paraplegic, like it had all the things that they had. No offense to any of those things. I'm just saying, like, that's the way they hired. Right. And so when you looked, for example, at her social media team, there was like one dumb move after another.
Hilarious.
Look at that dumb video that she did.
Kamala HQ. Terrible.
The worst, dude. Like every single, you think like who decided to put this out on this day? And it was so tone deaf, and the video that she did, and I mean, everything was so cringy and weird.
Right.
It just felt so weird. And I think like most people, especially dudes like the kind of folks that watch your show, kind of younger, sort of younger alpha male crowd, like me.
Right. So you're good. I'll tell you what, you're good looking. I don't know what you're doing with the hyaluronic acid or what you got. You look great, bud. You're drinking your water. You're doing your workouts. You're good. You're doing well.
The one thing that I like, if you're in that crowd, you look at that and you can't help but be like, dude, that just
it's so far away from what it, the Dorito, the hot Dorito thing where Gretchen Whitmer is feeding some Instagram influencer that only very few people on TikTok, like, they were so online it actually hurt them. I have a very close friend that very liberal. We disagree on basically everything, but I've known her for, I don't know, 25, 30 years at this point. Like, I'll never, harm our relationship, our personal relationship over it. But she posted, Julia Roberts had the audacity to put out this video, to talk about how it is that the Kamala Harris campaign completely messed this thing up. But going to the celebrities and having people come out, and Cardi B of all people lecturing who I should vote for on stage, like, you're the same girl that sings Wet Ass Pussy. What are we talking about here? Like, do you think that rank and file Americans think that they should be, morally condescended to by someone that, admittedly drugged and raped men when you were a stripper? Like, I think we're missing the boat here. But it was funny. We had a conversation, this friend and I, Julia Roberts put out this video and she turned the comments off. And I immediately replied to my friend that posted it. I was like, hey, do you know why? Leonardo DiCaprio, Barack Obama, all these other people, Eminem, Oprah was paid $2.5 million. Call Her Daddy was paid $100,000 to make a one-time use set to get on her podcast. I was like, you know why all these people turn the comments off? And she was like, oh, because the internet trolls. And I was like, absolutely not. Because in the comment section, they get bodied so poorly that internal polling reports that it actually does the opposite of what it is that they're supposed to do. People watch those ads and they go, oh no. And every time they would post one of those ads, Trump's numbers would go up and up and up. And I was like, hey, you guys have a problem. We talked about legacy media last time, and I really feel vindicated. We were on the same page on this one, said it publicly as well, that podcasts, that independent analysts, that people that are willing to get out there in front of folks, the death knell of the Kamala campaign is when JD Vance and President number 47, Donald J. Trump, were able to go on in 3-hour long form conversations. JD Vance went on with Theo Vaughn as well, and he just sat around and he laughed like a normal dude and had the most people. The comments for that were overwhelmingly like, what are you guys talking about? Weird. This is the most normal dude I've ever talked to in my entire life. Shout out to JD Vance, not only an Ohio State guy, but also an E4. The E4 mafia is in the White House. Let's go. But you looked at the juxtaposition of these two positions, and you look at them side by side and you go, hold on, wait a second. You're calling this guy weird? He just sat in long form conversation, was able to hold a conversation with you for hours and hours. How do you feel that the mainstream media, which I hope is taking its last gasp and dying breath, how do you feel that they recover from this? Because I feel like their credibility is gone.
They don't. So the numbers right now, for example, if you look,
dude, MSNBC 28,000 viewers.
I mean, if
they're
you look
selling it, and that's hotel lobbies. That's not people watching.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's the only people watching at this point clearly are either just the sort of brainwashed masses,
airports,
or people like us who are like watching it to see what kind of like what the next horrible thing, the folks in
Right.
the viewer are going to say.
Oh my goodness.
And
Did you see Sunny Hostin had to basically hostage video
yeah,
herself?
wasn't that great? So
Oh,
so the whole the fascinating thing about media, we did talk about on the last episode, like the transition from sort of Walter Cronkite to the independent show like the one you're having now. The seminal moment, by the way, when that happened is when Joe Rogan's show, at the time of Tucker Carlson had roughly about 30 million viewers per episode.
Sure.
And Joe Rogan passed that right around 2016 and went to 100 million per episode.
Yep.
In that moment, legacy media, it was the death knell for that, and independent media literally became the media. Then 2020 came around, and literally you didn't know. Everyone was desperately trying to find out what's true,
right?
And they knew they were being lied to. They just knew they were being lied to, but no one knew where to get their information from,
or how, or why. Why can't I find that? Why wasn't I allowed to DM the Hunter Biden laptop story? Why wasn't I allowed to talk about these things? And it wasn't just we were being shouted down. Places like Turning Point, Charlie Kirk, who did yeoman's work in this last election, to really get out and get to the campuses and have those clips go out. I will say that the conservative side really did understand social media and the ground game better this time, and it shocked the Democrats, and that's why, in part, that they're reeling. But when you look at the overarching thing of social media, you were like, wait a second. And that's when those seeds were sort of planted to be like, wait, why can't I talk about this? Why is this a thing that you are telling me that I can't say? Where is this Russian collusion thing come from? The Steele dossier, we can show you that it was bought and paid for. Like, that was kind of like the break point for people started, you can call it your red pill moment, or you can call it, the start of the downfall of the MSM. But that's when those cracks started showing, when, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski go on their show every single morning and call the guy literally Hitler. The natural progression of them begging to go to Mar-a-Lago for a 90-minute meeting to talk to them. Like, you don't beg to go to literal Hitler and talk to him. That's not a thing.
I mean, it's fascinating. You had like in 2020, 2021, you had a guy named Alex Berenson who nobody knew who he was, honestly. And he was an author, but nobody knew who he was until then. And all of a sudden he was releasing very substantive information about COVID, and then eventually substantive information about the vaccines. Of course, got kicked off of Twitter at the time, which made him even more popular. It's like the whole, if you strike me down, you will only make me stronger. I think that's from Star Wars. Episode 4. Did I just quote that one right?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not a Star Wars guy. Nanu.
My point is the kind of thing. Dude, you need to watch not the ones now.
I don't know. I just say that to make
became a fighter pilot, man. Luke Skywalker, I don't remember who Luke Skywalker, what actor was that? I don't remember which guy that was. I conveniently try to forget.
Yeah, right. Yeah. We forget about that since he's, TDS.
So, man, when they blew up the Death Star, I was like, I'm going to be a fighter pilot. Well, I thought it was going to be a space. Eventually, when Elon Musk figures that out. But
how pissed are you that they came up with a Space Force and you don't get to be a space pilot?
I think Steve Carell, as the commanding general in the Space Force show, weaned me off of that. But
do you know how many times people would send me clips of this and be like, hey, how close to this is the real military? I was like, whoever's advising on that show is a genius, because
it's fascinating.
It's exactly correct.
By the way, speaking of space, the Pentagon in the last month has basically almost completely unearthed almost every single piece of document that we already knew existed.
Oh yeah. No, there's aliens. Yeah, non-biologics that. Oh yeah, no. You know what's funny about the zeitgeist in which we live? Like 6 days ago, the Pentagon straight up said in a congressional hearing, "Oh yeah, totally. There's alien technology. Yeah. Oh, and we reverse engineered it, and we've been using it. So stuff that goes on in Groom Lake and like in whatever. Oh no, we totally been doing that." And people were like, "Oh, tight." And then they just went on with their lives like 24 hours later.
Yeah, like literally went from that to I can't believe Matt Gaetz is going to be, I mean, literally, like,
hey, did you guys hear about this guy for SecDev? He doesn't have any qualification.
I mean, 10 years ago, that would have been the single headline for about a month and a half.
Forever.
And now it's like people, hey, okay, that's fine. That's why I kind of knew that anyway.
Sure.
Again, there's a post-COVID sort of thing, which is at this point, no one is completely sure exactly what's true. So they just assume the government's lying to us.
Sure.
So we already knew that aliens existed, and we already knew about, because we just assumed if they weren't telling us that they were lying, you know? And so everybody's like, yeah, I already knew that.
Now it's like the opposite. Now that they're telling us that they exist, I had a joke with a friend. They were like, "Holy crap, did you see this?" And I was like, "Yeah, it makes me think it isn't true." Project Bluebeam.
True. Yeah. By the way, the issue was forced by a guy named Lou Elizondo. If you want a really interesting read, get Imminent. He basically worked as the lead guy in the Pentagon's UAP program. Basically, UAP is essentially unidentified phenomenon, not
Aerial
necessarily
phenomenon, right?
aerial phenomena. Yeah. So essentially, he's a UFO. And so he wrote an entire book. So he left the Pentagon in protest after 20 years of running the UAP program for 20 years, literally his fingers and hands in every single thing. And he came out and then filed a whole bunch of Freedom of Information Act so he could legally publish a book and not get thrown in jail. And he published everything, dude. So when you read and you hear what we've been researching literally since 1942, 1946, it's pretty crazy what's out there.
It's called Imminent: Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs, written by Luis Elizondo.
If you want to understand that topic from sort of like the non-conspiracy theory, like literally the guy who was there, and I've been recently on a whole bunch of podcasts, like UFO podcasts too, because almost like the original sightings were F-18s that caught these aircraft moving, at Mach 8 and
like through water.
Gs.
That was when I saw, I remember, so back in 2021, there was like the initial tranche of videos that were declassified that were then allowed to be on the drives, and they popped up. I was deployed, literally deployed, and somebody hit me up. They were like, bro, like we were both in theater, and he's like, bro, go to the share drive. And I was like, why? I mean, he was like, bro, go to the share drive. He was like, go to the share drive and look here. I was like, are these effing alien videos, dude?
Yeah.
You would see something go, like the one that just blew my mind, that was like, oh boy, we do not understand how these things work, is it was going like Mach 8 and it just dipped into the water and you didn't see the water move or it move, and then it came out on the same speed. And I was like, oh no. We don't understand anything about our environment.
It's crazy. So that particular encounter, so the one with the F-18s, to do this, it'll take me about 90 seconds to 2 minutes to sort of lay this out and explain this. But when fighter pilots brief, I was a fighter pilot, I think you know that. But but when fighter pilots brief, especially when we're out at sea, we'll do these engagements where I'll say, you're going to go here and I'm going to go here. We're going to start here and we're going to go towards each other and fight. And we'll give each other a cap point, which is literally a random lat long. Mm-hmm. It's not like an actual spot, but we'll be like, all right, you're at 3230 north, 11730 west or whatever. I'm here, and we'll put it into our system as a cap. I'll call that Boston. You call that New York. I'll take Boston. You take New York. Those are our cap, Combat Air Patrol points. Mm-hmm. So these guys go out. They're heading towards on their mission to go fight each other, and they encounter this thing that's basically 500 feet above the water, just sort of hovering above the water. They put their FLIR on it. At the same time, by the way, there's an Aegis cruiser, which is an unbelievable radar system that's tracking the exact same thing. All of a sudden, this thing pulls 80 Gs, goes from 500 feet to 80,000 feet, which is impossible. There's not a single craft that we have that can do 80 Gs without falling apart. And there's not a pilot who can do more than 15 without falling apart.
They would just turn into soup. Like we had, pilots of like 4G studies, like Chuck Yeager, very famous test pilot in the United States Air Force. He took like 7 or 8 Gs on a rocket or whatever, and you could see like his blacked out eyeballs or whatever else. Your human body just turns into soup. No clue how to do it. 7.5 Gs is the max for F-18, 9 Gs roughly for an F-16. That's probably about the max. The human body can do maybe 30 Gs sort of instantaneous, but not sustained, and maybe at the most 10 or 12 Gs sustained before you're just like passed out. Right. And so the aircraft goes to 80,000 feet. Then it shoots, like you said, into the water without slowing down, comes back out of the water, and then flies immediately and hovers right at the cap point that those two dudes had debriefed on about an hour ago. Okay. Mm-hmm. How it even knew that was literally in their brief an hour ago. Right. And so in the book, essentially what you start to find out when you understand these particular things is they love water, and they're really attracted to things that are nuclear. So our nuclear carriers, our nuclear submarines, and we do have a lot of nukes that are out over the water. And so, it leads to a lot of suspicions as to where they may come. I started to think maybe they're not even from outer space. Like literally, maybe they live down. Remember the stories of Atlantis and stuff? Like maybe they're down. Are we going to start talking about Hollow Earth? Because, bro, I'm here for it. I mean, here for it.
I mean, you think about it. You're like, it's a lot harder to overcome the friction of water than it is the friction of air. Mm-hmm. So clearly, their technology advanced so that they can maneuver really well in the water. That tells me that they probably literally like live in the water, which we don't even know. We know more about the moon and Mars than we do the bottom of our ocean.
100%. What is it, like 1%? We have actually explored like 1% of the bottom of the ocean, and especially the deep ocean. We have no idea what's down there.
I mean, we had like until about 15 years ago, we just assumed at a certain point there was nothing that was living ever, and then all of a sudden we found these thermal vents and these animals that weren't even using oxygen, they were breathing like sulfur dioxide or something like that.
Right.
And we're like, wow, well, that's new. Like
Yeah,
all
like
of a
a
sudden,
giant. Yeah, I remember. I'm old enough to remember it happened in our lifetime. Like the giant squid, they thought it was
yep,
something that never existed, and then
yep.
it washed up on shore one time, and people were like, "Oh my god." We're gonna transition real quick, but it's another animal, and it talks about how we're gonna fix our government, fix the overreach. Can you tell me why Peanut the squirrel and the killing of Peanut the squirrel was such a seminal event for the
Wasn't that
people
great?
in this? You know what? I saw a meme that said, somebody was like, I just don't understand why it is. And somebody put it so succinctly. I was just looking for it. I can't find the meme that I want, but I'll have Jared put it in post. But it was basically because it was like, it describes the level of government
Yeah,
overreach for what we've been willing to accept. Like, we don't have
yeah,
a single client off Epstein's list, off Diddy's party list. Like, none of these people have been prosecuted, right? Like, if you look at the Epstein, you don't even have to worry about the conspiracy theories about all the stuff that Jeff Epstein was or wasn't, whatever else. But you look, and that was the biggest child sex trafficking case that has ever went down in the
yeah.
history of America. Not a single person. We got the one person that facilitated it, and not any of the clients that we know have ever been prosecuted one time. None of that has happened, and the government somehow found a way to have 8 federal agents in a 5-hour standoff euthanize a squirrel. And it was one of those things that was like the rallying cry for people. I had
It
a
was
good friend of mine said, Harambe opened the time portal in 2016 and broke the timeline, and now Peanut's going to fix it. So we're going to avenge Peanut. But why, jokes aside on that, why was that such a thing in the zeitgeist? Like, why do
it
you
was
think people
crazy.
connected to that?
Yeah, I mean, here's the reason why. By the way, people like animals more than people.
Mm-hmm.
So if, for example, if something horrible happens to somebody on the other side of the political space, the sort of like demented American goes, "Oh well, he deserved it,"
Sure.
or
Right.
or if someone on your side of the political aisle is doing something horrible,
Yeah.
people are like, "Oh, let's just like not talk about that."
It's othering, it's dehumanizing, right? It's a thing that we all do. Like, as long as you can make yourself the victim, then the oppressor can do nothing that doesn't deserve the worst of
Yeah,
human society. Correct.
people have unbelievable cognitive dissonance,
Right.
dissonance when it comes to their tribe or the people who aren't in their tribe.
Right.
That said, you can't have it's this cute little squirrel.
It's an animal, right? Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
We
the
forgot
video,
about my boy Fred too. Shout out to Fred the raccoon. He kind of got glossed over.
I know,
This,
I
but they
know.
killed my boy Fred too, dog.
You see the videos of like this guy coming home and he's like, it jumps on his shoulder. Literally, there's not a cognitive dissonance in the world that could go,
That
oh,
could
that
explain that
squirrel
away.
deserved it. And
Right.
that's why it was so unbelievably powerful as like a meme. When I say meme, I don't mean like a visual meme. The actual definition of the word meme is a mind virus, literally
Right.
something that spreads. And I'm not kidding you. I probably retweet 2 things on Twitter a day. That day, I must have done it 15 times, and I
Dude, all of
couldn't
them were
stop
so
talking about
good.
Peanut. You know what I'm saying? It was like
They were
such a
so
thing.
good. My
And-
favorite one was, the Black Hawk Down scene. He was like, "Hey, Peanut's gone, man. I'll be outside." And it's just a picture of Wojak crying. I was like, bro, like I was getting fired
Yeah.
up, man. I was like, son of a, don't
And
you
then it
make me
just showed,
feel?
and I think it just obviously it showed what people already knew, which was the government, has way overstepped. I mean, way overstepped. Like I was doing some construction work around my house, and we needed a permit, which basically means
Oh, bless your
permission, right?
heart. Here we go.
And I was thinking, how would I explain this to Thomas Jefferson?
How would I
I
explain?
need
I love the thought experiment of explaining out of like
Yeah.
pretend you have an alien that is completely sentient and knows everything but doesn't understand anything about what we do. Explain to me how I have to ask some government official
Yeah.
that I did not
Yeah.
elect or care about for permission to do something to my own house, which I bought.
Yeah, you need like I can see Thomas Jefferson saying you need permission.
No.
Why would you need? Why would you?
He'd
Need
be like, you know what you need? You need a musket. That's what you need.
Yeah.
Go kill that guy. That guy's a tyrant.
It does reset the. I mean, the idea behind the government, obviously, is the government. And it was interesting. Like even all those founding fathers, like they almost all left Congress or the White House pretty financially destitute. Like
Right.
Washington had to died literally in debt.
Oh yeah, Thomas Paine, my favorite founding father. Thomas Paine, 6 people showed up to his funeral when he died, and he was one of the reasons that America is like Thomas Paine's common sense, and he was the forebearer of a whole lot of things that, by the way, both sides of the aisle. I mean, he's the first anti-slavery guy. He was the first guy that wanted individual rights and freedoms, and common sense was one of the preeminent books of his time. And he died. 6 people showed up to that guy's funeral.
He needed Amazon.
He really did. Yeah, he could have. Yeah, he
He's
would have
probably
been
making a lot of money on Amazon. By the way, that's in the common public domain at this point. So I bet you people are making millions of dollars
Thomas
on
Paine's works.
Thomas Paine
100%.
and Thomas Paine and 6 people. Yeah. So those guys, and I think they understood they were serving, like they took their time off of their work or business or farm or whatever, or their lawyer job or whatever it was to serve. And they were like serving. Nowadays, when you get elected, it's like you become like a celebrity, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You go to UFC fights and stuff like that. And I'm not saying necessarily that's wrong, but what we missed is the fact that they're working for us, right? So that woman who called the hit on Peanut the Squirrel,
How dare she?
technically, like she's working for us. We kind of forgot that, you know?
Right.
Yeah, that was a very seminal moment. And like I said, there's no way you can hate a squirrel, especially not that squirrel. So
my boy Fred. That was my other favorite meme too, is like, you know, the classic, you know, girls with a time machine. It's like, I'm your granddaughter. Oh, really? And like boys with a time machine, it's handing a raccoon a Glock.
yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
bro, go find Peanut and hide. They're coming. Like it's just a dude crying.
Yeah.
Like, son of a bitch. So speaking of a return to normalcy and some stuff that went way, way too far, we kind of already hit on it earlier. But DEI, and we're going to keep it specifically within the military to kind of focus this down. So the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff right now, very famously, CQ Brown, he said there were too many white pilots when he was in charge of the Air Force Academy. I don't know how it is that a black person or a female is a better fighter pilot than anybody else. There's no data to really support that. But how is it that we return to normalcy in something resembling a meritocracy? I know the DoD is a large ship. I know we've been turning for a long time, but how is it that we can start having beneficial and smart, nuanced conversations in order to bring back to center some of these programs, which are far overreaching?
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to just very simply. So I remember a conversation between a Marine Corps general and a Navy admiral. I think it was at the Naval Aviation Symposium. It was like 1996. I was literally a second lieutenant, like brand new in the Marines. I mean, I had like my bars and no ribbons or anything. It was early on. And I was listening to these two talk. I think I was like the escort for one of them, or I was in charge of driving the car or whatever. And the Navy admiral said to the Marine general, "Hey, when are you guys going to have females flying airplanes?" And the Marine general said, when one of them is good enough to fly our airplanes. And I was like, I really like that answer. And by the way, at the time, the Navy was in the process of training a female pilot named Karen Holtgren. Karen Holtgren was forced through primary training, forced through intermediate training, forced through advanced training. She performed at every level, but they pushed her through because she was going to be the Navy's first female fighter pilot.
Right.
She went in the F-14. She was training the F-14 in the F-14 Fleet Replacement Squadron, what we call the RAG Replacement Group. And as she was doing her second carrier landing, she was in a left-hand turn, stalled the F-14, turned it over, crashed into the ocean, and died. And Karen Holtgren is dead today because of a military system that was trying to force somebody through so that they could get a golf clap. And I will just say, as far as the generals go, I flew in my squadron, was the first female Marine fighter pilot, also the first female backseater. The first female Marine fighter pilot was good at flying airplanes. She was very good. Maybe not as good as me, but she was really good.
Of course.
But I would just tell you, like, I'm thankful for that approach, which is like, if you qualify for the job, then you qualify. Now, women in combat roles, specifically ground combat roles, is another story altogether.
100%.
Anybody who's been through SEER school knows that's a bad idea, pretty much across the board. I'm not saying like anything globally. I'm just simply saying that's based on my own experience.
Right.
So the way to go back to center is just very simply to just promote people based on performance, you know?
Right.
Like I'll just tell you, like, my friends, I have a woman that speaks at my event, or quite a few of my events. Literally one of my best friends in the entire world. Her name is Marquetta Breslin. She's a mid-40s black woman, and she speaks at my event. And I remember saying one time, I said, you know how offensive it would be to my good friend if I had told her, hey, the reason I'm bringing you here to teach is because we needed some black people. Like, that's really screwed up. Right. The reason I bring her is because I love her, and she's an amazing speaker,
and she's a killer.
She totally delivers. And so it's offensive. I think it's offensive to women and minorities to say, hey, we're hiring you. You know what I'm saying? Like, how about this? You're the best one for the job. Like, that's actually the most honoring thing that you can do for folks like that too.
Yeah.
And I think
to your point, I mean, you know, killer chick, KC, Kim Campbell. She was one of only 4 pilots to ever land an A-10 in manual reversion. She did that after her plane was shot to literal shit. Yeah. And she was flying on manual controls. She saved hundreds of dudes on the ground in Iraq at her own personal cost. She's a killer. She is the example of who you should be when you're there. You juxtapose that with a backseater that just got a silver star for shooting down some one-way drones, and you're like, hey, I don't really necessarily know if those two things are equal. And then when you put that in the terms of, we talk about it all the time, for ground combat operations, like, how about the Marine, we'll just stick to data so that I don't make anybody mad, or stick to the datum. The Marine Corps just did a lengthy study about every single Marine infantry unit that was either a blended unit that had females with it, or that did not, that had sole males in it. And guess who underperformed in every single category across the board at every single test? The blended unit. Like, I'm sorry, that's just the data. Like, we got to get away from it.
The Israelis tested that in the 80s, early 90s. And
right, because of their conscripts, because everybody in Israel has to go serve in the military. That's why, fun story, that's also why Krav Maga and Kapap were invented. It was specifically for their smaller female conscripts to be able to fight somebody off. Yeah, I was actually a Krav Maga instructor, but that's a history of Krav, is they made it so that you could have smaller recruits, specifically conscripts, to be able to protect themselves in hand-to-hand, because the Israelis know war.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you read any of C.J. Lemoyne's books?
I haven't.
So they're books about a former fighter pilot, who's a Krav Maga like expert in all of his exploits and like almost dying. I was just wondering, because I just wanted to ask one question in this podcast.
Yeah, you did great. You crushed it. Well, hey, I know you got a heart out. It's been good. It's been a fast-paced hour. I love having you on the show every time you're on. I want to end with something positive. I know that my life feels lighter. I know that I am more hopeful. I love pulling up my investment accounts and seeing magic money just reappear. Like, seeing green in my investment accounts recently has been a welcome change.
Isn't that great?
What are you most hopeful about, and where do you think we can go as a country in these next 2 years?
I love that question. By the way, I have I have some crypto, but I don't really pay much attention to it. And
let's go.
Like a couple days ago,
to the moon, baby.
A couple days ago, I logged into Coinbase and I was like, hey,
XRP. Oh, wow. Solana.
Yeah, that's actually my primary holding. I am not financial advice. Do your own research.
Right.
My primary holding on the crypto side is Ripple XRP. I think it's amazing.
Listen, project. Big five. I'm going to put it out there. Big five for everybody. Bitcoin. It's daddy. Get yourself some Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and then you can choose between SHIB or Doge.
I would throw Avalanche in there too. So the projects I like the best are the ones that actually run like a railroad. In other words, you can process on them.
Right.
And Ethereum is like the primary network from that. But I do like Ripple does that too. So does Avalanche.
Ripple's going to get picked up by international banking as their primary.
I think so. Actually, I think so. That will take
and not financial advice, but I'm saying like what it's already cleared those the initial like hurdles that it had, especially legally. And now you're seeing like now that they figured out the transfer fees and whatever, and as soon as it gets picked up by international banking, is the blockchain of choice, baby, to the moon. Yeah, and then I ain't going to be on a podcast anymore.
Yeah, no,
you're not going to know it hits, but there's going to be signs.
So there will be signs.
Yeah.
Okay, so what makes me positive? All right, first of all, we as Americans have a tradition of basically trashing the generation that comes behind us.
We do.
And I will just tell you, last night. So my daughter's 19, my son's 17, my other son's 16. I have a 6-year-old, but I'm going to talk about the 3 oldest.
Holy crap! I have a 19 and a 7-year-old, a 17-year-old as well, and then an 8-month-old. So we have the first 2, and then I got a younger one. But okay, let's go.
Way to go, man! You just kind of keep doing it every 10 years. So every month, my 3 oldest hosts at our house a worship night. They make a huge amount of food. They bring on all their friends, 10, 15 friends. They put a fire out on the fire pit, and then a bunch of dudes will play the guitar, and they'll just sing. And I was telling my wife, I said, it's amazing. Like the worst possible thing that could happen here is like I had to stay up late, and it just really speaks to like this generation that's coming behind us. And I am so encouraged by this like 15 to 25-year-old generation that's behind us right now. I'm seeing core values, the kind of core values that you and I were taught in the military. I'm seeing like a little bit of a respect for seniority, authority, people who want to really contribute, like to bring something to the table. And that just shows us that we're doing something right. I think conversations like this, like bringing truth and conversations out into the light. Like I didn't know any of this political stuff when I was that age, and they know all this stuff.
Right.
That's because they listen to people like Joe Rogan, or they follow people like Elon Musk, or even like my daughter follows someone like Taylor Swift, but actually got to see like the other side of all of that too. And so because of this open conversation that we're finally having, I think it's great. And I've never, ever been more optimistic. I think it's really important right now for good people, like the people listening to the show right now, to keep your nose to the grindstone. Don't Don't do a victory dance in the end zone. I'm committed to a 40 to 80 year solution specifically regarding our country. I think maybe last time I told you at some point I'm going to run for president. And that may actually even be in a third party. Who knows what's going to happen down the line. But I feel like right now we should be planning and training the next generation of leaders. Literally, there's a 12-year-old right now that is going to be president 45 years from now. And I'd love to find out who that person is so that we can start to put people around him and start to train that young man or woman for future leadership. I think that's the way that we need to start to think. So I'm super encouraged, man. I'm excited to see where we're going to go.
And that's why we're talking to every single one of you that's listening right now, everybody from 13 to 19 to 25 to 42, because we want to start setting up the next generation for the best possible generation that we could possibly see in the United States of America, because we love this place. Ed Rush, go to edrush.com, check out everything that he's got over there. Go to ONESREADY.com, get one of these sweet shirts that's out there. Ed, you have
t-shirts.
Yeah, you got an open invite. Anytime you want to come on, this was a blast. Let's do it again soon. Everybody else out there, make sure you're smashing that like, subscribe button. Make sure you're getting it in front of other people. That would really help. Share it with everybody that you know. Go to edrush.com. Ed Rush, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
All right.